That's Lost Gander. That's Stephen Wade from his new album, Hands on the Tune. And you're listening to Bluegrass Country. I'm Chris Teskey, and I'll be here with you until 6 o'clock. Stephen Wade is here with me. We're at the Patuxent Studios, and great to see you again, Stephen.
Well, thank you. It's great to see you.
Yeah. And thanks for taking the time to talk to us today.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Right. Well, your new album, Hands on the Tune, has just come out, and the title of it made me think of I don't remember which Irish musician I heard this from, but he said traditional music is the work of many hands.
Oh, there you go.
And I thought that the Hands on the Tune was I don't know if that was a reference to that, but it all sort of hung together for me that it's your hands on the tune now, but it was somebody else's hands before, and
yeah, that's how this music works. It's a social creativity. It's not just an individual. It's all these different getting their hand. It's a shortening of a phrase of getting their hands on the tune, which was the name of a lecture I gave years ago at the University of Illinois, and that's what. And he couldn't fit that many words on the front end, so hands on the tune. But that's exactly right. That you have a common possession, and to which all these people make an individual contribution, and we see that repeatedly in the music that you celebrate on your shows.
Now your album is recorded live from two different shows.
It's just like three different shows. Two were recorded at Strathmore AMP here in Washington area in late 2017, and the other half of it comes from Chicago from a concert I did last April at the Old Town School of Folk Music. And that's the source of the three sources for this.
Now, before we started, you said that this album was a joy to make.
It was joyful to make. Yes, it was. I loved working with Tom Minty, goodness knows, and his judgment and was crucial and pivotal, as well as just the visiting these sorts of experiences again. It was fun. For me, making this record was different than any. Of course, it is different than any I've done before in a way that it works with the talking and the interaction with the audience. The audience plays a role on this record. I mean, their presence is there. It's palpable.
Now, who comes to your shows? I mean, you're presenting traditional music, and you're talking about the many hands that have gotten these tunes to where they are. Who is in the audience?
Recidivists, people who went to banjo dancing, the one-man show that I did for some 10 years here in Washington. And then hopefully younger people too. So I don't actually know the composition of the audiences in any specific way, but I certainly have met some of the folks, and not everyone has white hair who's there. But so it is a range of people of I suppose with an interest in Americana as well as in traditional music.
Because of banjo dancing, I think people think of you as a banjo player, and you are a banjo player, but you're also a guitarist, and really this is about exploring the music, not just about one instrument. Would you say that's right?
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm not really a banjo chauvinist, although it might seem like I am. And my interests, there's only one banjo song in the book I wrote, in The Beautiful Music All Around Us. I mean, I was interested in other forms, and I still am, and always will be. And I'm interested in the voice, as of course, and singing and songs, and so so it just goes beyond the banjo. For me, of course, the banjo has been an essential part of my life. But I started playing the guitar when I was a little boy. My guitar teacher was a Chicago blues player, Jim Schwall of the Siegel Schwall Blues Band.
Oh, right.
And so and because Jim and his partner Corky Siegel, the Siegel Schwall Band, they were opening for acts like Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, which enabled me as a little boy to see those and meet those players, actually, because they would have matinees and at these saloons and taverns, and the door would be swung open, and I could stand outside and listen, because couldn't go in. And so there was a lot of accessibility, contact with black music in Chicago, where I grew up. And then I first came to Washington when I was a teenager, and it was the bluegrass capital, and I was very comfortable in that environment and then I came back here. I was working at a record warehouse in Fairfax County, Virginia, an unincorporated part of it, and came back here. And I played here a couple times in this early mid-'70s, like at the Cellar Door and places like that. And I came back here in January '81 to play a 3-week engagement at Arena Stage, which was a long 3 weeks because I was there for 10 years and 2 weeks, and it was a blessing and for me, and never left. So this has been home for most of my life now.
All right. Well, I'd like to listen to some of your guitar playing.
Okay.
Let's listen to Diamond Joe.
Okay.
All right. So this is Diamond Joe, as played and sung by Stephen Wade, and this was recorded at the Old School in Chicago.
Old Town School. Yes, it was. Yeah, last
Right.
April.
And this is from Stephen's album, Hands on the Tune.
Learning from people also consists of learning from places where people who had sung, including Singers for Library of Congress, as you probably know, number of recordings that were made in the 30s and early 40s for the library were done at state penitentiaries. The first of the penitentiaries that I visited, and there are a fair number of them in the course of my work, was Parchman State Penitentiary in Parchman, Mississippi. It's 22,000 acres, and at the time the recordings were made, it was essentially a profit-making enterprise for the state of Mississippi. It was a farm, and the convicts worked that farm, and they lived in small buildings, and their sergeant, lived right next door to them. And one of the persons I was studying was Charlie Butler.
Went up on the mountain, give my horn a blow. Thought I heard Miss Maybelle say, yonder come my beau. Diamond Joe, come and get me. Diamond Joe, come and get me. Joe, come and get me. Diamond Joe. No stories, neither would I lie. I wonder, did my Maybelle stay? Did she keep on by? Diamond Joe, come and get me. Diamond Joe, come and get me. Joe, come and get me. Diamond Joe. Gonna work in the country, neither on Force's farm. I'm gonna stay till my Maybelle come, she gonna call me down. Diamond Joe, come and get me. Diamond Joe, come and get me. Joe, come and get me. Diamond Joe. Joe, where'd you find him? When Joe, where'd you find him? When Joe, where'd you find him? Diamond Joe. Ain't gonna work in the country, neither on Force's farm. I'm gonna stay till my Maybell come. She gonna call me down. Diamond Joe, come and get me. Diamond Joe, come and get me. Joe, come and get me, my Black Joe.
That's Stephen Wade with his version of Diamond Joe, Stephen playing the guitar. That's a live recording made at the Old Town School in Chicago, and that's from Stephen's latest album, Hands on the Tune. So, when I was listening to that version of Diamond Joe, I noticed that there's some lyrics in there that turn up in a lot of songs, that Up on the Mountain and Give My Horn a Blow.
Oh yes, it does, right? Which is immediately locks into an earlier time frame of references. The version that I did there, I drew from a man by the name of Charlie Butler. He was a convict. He was at Mississippi State Penitentiary in Parchman, Mississippi, when he was recorded doing that by the Library of Congress, and I visited a number of these state penitentiaries in the course of my work and writing the book, and Charlie Butler was one of the persons who I was drawn there to find, and what I could find about him. And it is fascinating. Diamond Joe is a song with there's various versions that are attached to that title of various melodies too. His is clearly putting it with that went up on the mountain, give my horn a blow. That you find that in Uncle Dave Macon, you find in a lot of dance songs. But then it gets into this other part about will my woman be home? Will she answer me? Coming to get me? Call me to home. Call me to home. I got a lot of different interpretations from different people about that song. But what persuaded me most was a woman who had been the secretary for 12 different superintendents at Parchman Prison. She had grown up there. Her father had been a guard there, and the guards and their families lived next door within the confines, within the wire of these little barracks that the prisoners were in at that time before they went into the larger kind of quarters that you would imagine now with sodium vapor lamps and all that stuff. This is different, and she thought of it as a song for someone who's at a parole board hearing, for someone who's promising to give employment to a convict after, and that helped with paroling, and at that time in the 30s and 40s. So that's part of how she connected it up, and that's how she read it.
Mm-hmm. When you're doing detective work on the source of a song, would a little phrase like that be a clue? Would that take you to another song and then another song?
Phrase, yes, that's exactly right. These songs, again, hands on the tune, they are seeds to other things, and may, in their different contexts, have different association and meanings. In the case of Diamond Joe, there's just various associations that'll arise with the different kinds of songs that emerge from it. What Tex Logan did, I interviewed him about his version of the song, and his reading of it, and what the concessions are in that song that made what it's essentialized its meaning were different than what he heard in Charlie Butler's song. But he said to me something fascinating, and your listeners know Tex Logan's music, and it was so wonderful. He said, I like a song that's both simple and complex at the same time. And so there's a simplicity to his song, and he associated that with the Charlie Butler song. And he said he'd never heard that version before, but he saw the deeper emanations of meaning that were coming out of it. And that call me to home, that's just, I just think that's quite important.
Well, I have to say that I heard a couple of references on in your record that I've heard in other songs, and it made me want to be a song detective. Like Sourwood Mountain has a line, she don't come and I don't follow.
Oh yeah.
Well, the Grateful Dead stole that.
Well,
Yeah.
appropriated it.
No,
Maybe.
appropriate.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean, maybe they
appropriate.
did. So I mean, Robert Hunter was a folkie.
Oh, sure.
Wasn't he? And so he would have heard those lyrics. It seems to me.
Oh, he absolutely would have known Sourwood Mountain. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I learned that song from two sources, from Doc Hopkins, who was my teacher's teacher. Doc had come to Chicago from Eastern Kentucky. Well, he was born in Harlan County, then he grew up in Rockcastle County. In fact, he went to elementary school, one-room school with Carl and Hardy. Carl Davis, who wrote the song Kentucky, and I'm going to get my baby out of jail song. He and John Lair, who was the essentially the personnel manager at WLS in the 30s. He went that same one-room schoolhouse, Rosebud Schoolhouse there, and so that Lair invited Doc to come up to Chicago in 1930 to be on the National Barn Dance, which precedes the Grand Ole Opry. And then Doc, in 1948, begins teaching Fleming Brown, who taught me. And then when I was a teenager, I played to the end of Doc's life as his accompanist. And we played here at the National Folk Festival, Wolf Trap and stuff. And I just loved him. He's a grandfather to me in so many ways. And so he sang that song, and he told the funniest story about it. He said, in all my travels, he said, with Sourwood Mountain, he said, I wanted to find that place where all the pretty girls were, Sourwood Mountain. And he said, I could go in town, they always say, well, it's the next one over. It's the next one over. He said, I never quite got there. And so that was one of the sources for the song for me. And the other was Frank Prophet. Frank Prophet was from Reese, North Carolina, and he was a fretless banjo maker and player. And he's the source for the folk music revival of the song Tom Dooley. It was it had been recorded prior to that, but on a commercial record. But his version, his grandmother knew Laura Foster in the song. They lived the next county over, and so it was a family song. And Tom Dooley was the first song Frank Prophet ever learned to play, and his father played it too. And so it was a community work. And anyway, so Frank Prophet did a cool version of that song on the fretless banjo.
What was the first song that you learned?
The first song I learned from Fleming Brown was Roll on the Ground from Thaddeus Willingham of Gulfport, Mississippi, who recorded that for the Library of Congress in 1939. And I got to know his family, and they were wonderful. They were wonderful people, and that's certainly a song that goes to the mid 19th century in his case. So I think I first was drawn to bluegrass. And I took some lessons in Boston from a banjo player there named Dan Marcus, and then I got to Chicago back when I was 18 or 19, and I'd been living here in Washington, earned the money to buy my first banjo here, and there was a book, Pete Seeger's famous manual was How to Play the Five-String Banjo, and in the front of it, it said, special thanks acknowledgement go to artist and banjo picker of Chicago, Fleming Brown. Fleming Brown was a commercial artist, and he drew some of the pictures in the book. And I thought, well, I wonder who that is. And I lived in the neighborhood where the Old Town School of Folk Music was, and I went over there, and I didn't really know. I asked the lady behind the desk, Evelyn Brightman was her name, and I said, do you happen to know someone named Fleming Brown? She said, yeah, he's teaching here tomorrow night. And then I said the stupidest thing. I said, well, how many banjos does he have? And she said, 15. And I thought, oh, sign me up. He must be serious. And then I saw him the next day, and it was the greatest thing I ever heard in my life. It just absolutely floored me and set my life's course. And so, and that was the first song in his class before I started taking from him privately that he taught us. And then he turned his class over to me to teach for a while.
You used a lovely phrase to describe him, and you said that you wanted to meet other musicians of comparable artistry. Yeah, and but you were referring to Fleming Brown. Now, what do you mean by artistry in that way?
Well, it's this distinctiveness. Again, I mentioned at the beginning about a common possession, individual contribution, that pairing of those two ideas. That Fleming was a marvelous singer and player, and so were the people he learned from. And so was Doc Hopkins, and so it's that quality of that these players bring to it, this interpretive, creative quality, both. These are an act of creation in their performances all the time. One doesn't separate from the other.
What would be a good choice?
Why don't we try Home Sweet Home? That's got plenty of talking at the beginning. I'm talking pretty fast there, but the piece finds its own pace.
Okay, Home Sweet Home.
All right.
Yeah, from Stephen Wade, from his new album, Hands on the Tune.
Russ Hooper is going to join us tonight. This has been a hit in the United States since 1823 when it was written. It was a vocal song. It was called Home Sweet Home. It's also the second song ever recorded on the banjo, which was recorded by a New York school teacher from Buffalo by the name of Carrie Cochran in 1889 for an Edison cylinder. And the drum major quick step was the first thing, and the Home Sweet Home was the second. And this became a show-off piece, a showpiece for banjoists. And in the 1860s and 70s, banjo players by the name of Frank Converse, Charles Dobson, Emery Hall were all playing virtuoso elaborations on the tune. And in 1880, a magazine in London called the London Era referred to Emery Hall as the Paganini of the banjo. In 1959, the New York Times referred to Earl Scruggs as the Paganini of the banjo. It's an enduring idea. And when Earl Scruggs recorded Home Sweet Home in 1961, he had a Dobro-player with him by the name of Josh Graves. And Josh was a good friend of Russ's. And when Josh left the band, guess who Earl Scruggs called up to replace him? Yeah. So that's the thing.
Stephen Wade and Home Sweet Home from his new album Hands on the Tune on the Patuxent Records label. And I'm here with Stephen, and we're talking about the record and pretty much everything else that comes to mind.
Yeah.
You had done a Hobart Smith project for Smithsonian some time ago.
Yes. That was called In Sacred Trust, the 1963 Fleming Brown tapes. So what happened was, in October 1963, Hobart Smith came to Chicago. He's a multi-instrumentalist from Saltville, Virginia. He had first come to Chicago that January to play at the University of Chicago Folk Festival. And then he came back to do sort of a short Midwestern tour, and he played a concert at the Old Town School of Folk Music and a banjo workshop that Fleming led, and he played at a boys' school near their secondary school, and he played at the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana for their Folksong club. And Hobart stayed with Fleming for 2 weeks, and it was during that time that they made the most extensive body of recordings Hobart ever made for anyone. Hobart Smith was the reason that Fleming Brown picked up the banjo. In 1948, a record that he had done with his older sister, her name was Texas Smith Gladden, came out, and Fleming heard that, and they did a duet version of Poor Ellen Smith with Hobart playing the banjo at 90 miles an hour in Texas with a high keening mountain voice above it, and it just absolutely nailed Fleming, and he wanted to play the banjo at that point. So, and then he took lessons from Doc Hopkins, and so here he's coming back to meet his inspiration, really, and the two got along very, very readily, and they made hours and hours of tapes. And originally, the tapes were designed that Fleming would create a book, and Fleming would teach students Hobart's tunes from it. So a lot of the time on the tape is Hobart playing the tunes very slowly, but they aren't really the same way as he played them up at speed, because he would fill in the holes, of course. At any rate, a lot of recordings of tunes that came. He said, "I give you my hand to God, I haven't played that tune in 25 years," and tunes were coming into his mind in the collegiality of this all. But what happened is, that gives the album its title, is that before Fleming died, he handed me the tapes. He said, "Do something with this." So that was a trust, a sacred trust. He knew that these were some of the most important documents of his life. Mm-hmm. And then there was a trust that's audible between Fleming and Hobart, their trust. And then there's the fact that Hobart, who was born in 1897, is learning as a youth from players, and players born at the time of the Civil War, black players largely, whose name he specifies. They're not just anonymous to him. And he's holding them in sacred trust. I mean, he doesn't have a tape recorder. I mean, that doesn't exist. It's all in his memory and his desire. And he said, I played just exactly like. I don't think it could have been exactly like the way, because the degree of virtuosity he brought to these songs, and tunes. But it was what he brought to Fleming and onward. So I think of him as holding that in sacred trust. And so one of the primary tunes that they played, that Hobart played for Fleming, was a piece. He said, "You never heard anything like this." He said, "You never heard such a thing," he said. And it was a train imitation that he called Wabash Blues. And he only notes one note on the fretboard, on the fingerboard. But he said, you get a lot of good stuff down here with his right hand. So it's a lot of action in this tune. It's this sonorous, unusual, in fact, unique tuning just for this one tune, and the way he's playing it. Now, what you'll hear here on my recording is my recapitulation of it in the Wabash Blues. Mm-hmm.
All right, let's listen to the Wabash Blues by Stephen Wade from his new album, Hands on the Tune. That's the Wabash Blues. You're listening to Bluegrass Country, and I'm here with Stephen Wade, and we're talking about his new album, Hands on the Tune, which has just come out on Patuxent Records. And there's a quote in your liner notes from Hobart Smith that I love. He said, "I play the banjo for everything that's in it."
Yeah, and that's what he was saying, is that he would mine these songs, these tunes, and I think he certainly did that in relation to Wabash Blues. And that's actually one of the songs he was referring to, that these unique pieces that he recorded for Fleming that just he hadn't played in a quarter century, that were just coming back in the collegiality of this little wooden rec room in Fleming's basement, at the time that they were facing one another down there. And so as he played his tunes, they would grow in intensity and they would unfold. It wasn't, he would find variations within it and therefore play the banjo for everything. What he was referring to was just the banjo, it was the tune as well for everything that's in it. So he had an idealized sense. Bill Monroe was similar. He said about, when he talked about ancient tones, that as if the tune existed in an ideal state, and he would pull it out, and then he transformed that idea into that enormous body of creative work they did near the end of his life, of writing one tune after another. But that idea of that the tune existed and waited to be drawn from. Hobart had that idea too, of a fullness of a tune, and his sister shared in that idea as well.
Bob Dylan said, "My songs existed long before I came along. I just wrote them down with a pencil."
So it's an amanuensis for his own creativity. Well, that's a nice thought. That he views it that way. Well, certainly he's able to draw from tradition, creatively find new things to do with it. I mean, that's obviously a part of his achievement.
Stephen, I know you're a musical adventurer. What have you got planned for the summer?
Well, I'm writing another book,
Okay.
and so also for University of Illinois Press, and so I'm at about 120,000 words now, so I've got about another 100,000 to go, so we're more than that, really, 130,000 to go. So it'll be 250,000 words. So so that's my work. That's what I was doing earlier today, and then I have some playing to do. I'm going to be in Chicago at the Old Town School doing 4 different workshops at the end of June, and one of them will be on Hobart Smith, another one on Uncle Dave Macon, another one on sort of banjoistic songs. That was a term I learned from Paul Cadwell. Paul Cadwell, when I met him, he was the oldest man I knew. Woodrow Wilson had been his history teacher at Princeton before he became president, So Paul used that word banjoistic, and he's referring again to songs that had unique usage or utilization of the banjo's inherent properties. He was a ragtime type player, what they call a classic banjo player, and he was marvelous man and open to traditional music and folk music. Was very interested in it. In fact, in the years I knew him, of course he had a lot of birthdays. He lived to be very elderly, and people the last years of his life, people would come over on his birthday and play for him, and he just listened. And at one point he motioned me into another room, and he pulled out this telegram, old weathered piece of paper from the top drawer. And when he was at Harvard Law School, all the gentlemen at that time, had their own horses, and he was in the state militia. That was something that also gentlemen scholars were doing, who were law students. It certainly wasn't politics in the way we would associate it now. And it said, "Cadet Cadwell, report to Lawrence, Massachusetts at once. Bring your own horse." And it was the Lawrence textile strike, and he had to go there for that. So he had quite his own adventurous past. And then I learned also not only from Paul but from rural counterparts like Kirk McGee, and who was remarkable. He had been one of Uncle Dave Macon's accompanists, and he played in all manner of, and as did his brother Sam McGee, who was the first person to do a full flat top guitar solo instrumental in country music. Riley Puckett had done some breaks on his songs that were instrumental, but Sam McGee, when he does the Buck Dancer's Choice, that's a piece I did with Zan that's on this record. And Needle Case, that was one that the McGees both did. And there's another piece, too, that I played for Kirk McGee, his Snowdrop, when I visited him. So I don't know which of those you'd like to play, but they'll all be of interest.
Well, why don't we play Buck Dancer's Choice and Snowdrop and finish up with those? Shall we do that?
Okay, so all right, so Buck Dancer's Choice goes in the Needle Case, and then the other track would be Spanish Fandango, which is the prototype for, as I see it, for Snowdrop that Kirk did.
All right. Well, Stephen, thanks so much for. I feel like we're just getting going.
Yeah.
There's so much more to talk about.
Well, bless your heart.
But we'll leave it for here for now, and I hope we can do this again.
Well, thank you. I'd love that.
Oh, great. Okay, so we'll finish up. We'll listen to 2 tracks, Spanish Fandango and Snowdrop, and before that we'll hear Buck Dancer's Choice.
Okay. The first song that Zan and I recorded together was a medley. It was 2 pieces from the playing of Sam and Kirk McGee. So these are 2 tunes, Buck Dancer's Choice and Needle Case. This is Kirk McGee. I played for him the first lyrical banjo tune I ever learned, and it was okay with him. And so I'll first play a version of Spanish Fandango for you, and then I'll play this variation called Snowdrop. Spanish Fandango has been one of the most widely played pieces in American guitar and banjo repertory since it first comes into print in 1838.